So I have just three things: the unusual scaling problem we had to face, then how do we run our code in parallel, and then the developer survey insights. Hari did computer science, not really how much it helped, but start up with 1 year I worked at IBM and then moved on to start HackerRank and been the so the role of the CTO and co-founder changes. On day one you're writing all the code, so it's SD1 or SD2, whatever role it is, and then few years later you're doing sales and you're going and talking to customers, so you're doing all the roles. Right now I manage a team where we are trying to build new products and manage the developer community, which I'm going to talk about. So the unusual scale problem. So this is a screenshot of what HackerRank looks like. Like nothing fancy. There is a code editor. There is a problem statement. You got to write the code there, and if you get it right, the system is going to say you got it all right. If you get it wrong, it's going to say it's wrong. So in this case, when you click on this run code button, we upload your code and we run this code on our servers, and there are about 12 different test cases here. Obviously I didn't write the right code there. I was just returning some hard-coded value. So it ends up saying it's all wrong, like all the test cases is wrong. This is the input, here is your expected output, and this is the output your code produced. And if you ever if you write the correct code, it's going to say, okay, everything is passed. And this is what companies use for their hiring for the first round or the second round and so on. So the unusual challenge here is generally whenever I've read a lot in like high scale, how do you scale things, when you want to improve the scale, and you don't get a lot of buffer with the cost, like you want to improve scale with a small delta in cost, not like you can double and triple your costs. So one is like, how can I do more with the existing service, which is how can I do more, have more higher throughput. And some techniques here is like, if you have some bad performing code, like if you are there is your n+1 queries or different ways in which you can optimize the bad code you have written, you go ahead and optimize that. And the way to optimize that, two standard ways is, one is you cache the results. So you don't have to go to the database every single time to get the data. You can store it in your local memcache or Redis, and you get the data from there. Or you do your database optimizations as well, which is you can do some sharding, or you can have master slave. Different standard techniques I was used to, and this is like it's not an unsolved problem. There are many companies out there which have solved the scale problem. But in HackerRank, we have to run different languages for a given amount of time. So this is like 5 different languages I've picked. So if you write a Python code, we run that code for 10 seconds completely and then tell you, oh, your code is not optimal, so we expect a better performing code. And we have to run the code for 10 seconds in a container which has about 512 MB RAM. So for C++, it's 2 seconds. For other like Java and Go, it's 4 seconds. So we did internal comparative study of how fast different languages are, so that language doesn't give you an advantage. Like you write the same algorithm in Python or in Go, your code should pass the test cases we have. So for that, we need to give this 10 seconds there. So just to show like how long is this 10 seconds, right? So when you submit a code, and let's assume it's suboptimal, this is how long it, okay, the video doesn't play. It's supposed to play a 10-second timer. I think this is another Google to word problem, I guess. So it is a lot of time in server compute time, right? Like you don't wait for your response time, as in generally in the graphs you've seen would be milliseconds, not in not in multiple seconds, and not 10 seconds for sure. So what happens with the plan, or what happens with all the learnings I had before I started optimizing this? One, there was no database there. There is nothing to optimize in that. We were running a code which is submitted by our end users. I can't cache anything. These are all new code. Like people do change few lines here and there, and there is nothing for me to store pre-computed so that I can take it from cache. and the code is written by the developers. I can't optimize it. Like, it would be wrong on our side if I take a bad code, optimize it, and give a better score for them. Our role is to see if the code is optimized or not, and then there is nothing I could do here. So probably the primary meta learning from this is every scaling challenge is unique. I've read recently about like how Hotstar and Jio, when they're streaming the matches, people assumed, okay, put a caching in front of that, buy Akamai, and you're sorted. Like 1 crore people can see, and that's not really the case. There is lots and lots of things which goes behind the scenes when you're thinking about scaling a video platform. For a platform where we have to run the code submitted by our users, apart from the security and other challenges we have, scale is a very unique first time I had to deal with this. And I'm going to tell you how sort of we solved this, which is one is running their code in parallel, which now looking back sounds so obvious, probably wasn't when we were just building this at the early stages. So this is sort of the structure in which how a code runs in HackerRank, right? So whenever you start it, it goes to a queue. From the queue, a worker would pick something. It would create a sandbox for that particular language. In this case, let's pick it's Python. We still compile Python, even though you don't have to, because if there is a compilation error, it might be better to send it early on. Go, C++, Java, we obviously have to compile. If the code compilation is failed, we automatically send that to the end users. But if the code passes, if the compilation passes, we have, in the previous example we saw, we have about 12 test cases, and we used to run them one by one, and this is all in the same sandbox in which the code is compiled, so there is not a lot of message passing or anything we need to do. So run the test case 1, get the output, run the test case 2, get the output, and then finally at the gather results is where you would compare whether it's all the right solution or not. Send it to this. Pretty simple, straightforward, work like magic for few months, I would say. And then there was this large scale event where all our code, the servers which was running this, we call this code runners, they were all stuck with running bad code written by our users. So what did we do here? This is some weird formula we ended up doing to see. We started splitting the test cases. Like, so on one extreme, you could compile once and then run each test case in its own separate sandbox. And the other extreme is what we were doing, which is we would run all of them in one single sandbox. And obviously, even running each of them individually didn't help, because you have to fetch the data into that sandbox. The network cost and fetching the files, and that didn't work. So there is some sweet spot in between where you can take the test cases in batches, the optimal size, which is based on the time limit we give for a particular. For example, even now, Python, maybe it's just 2 is the right optimal size. But for Golang, maybe 5 or 10 is a good optimal size. So the optimal size also depends on how much time it takes to compile, how much time it takes to run the test case, and how much time it takes to fetch the metadata we have from that. Drew a graph there. So on the function, the right value of n, it's the number of test cases we have, and what is the split we used to have. And finally, this is the output after we deployed our changes. Like, so the top graph is our submission count, and the bottom one is the average, what we call the average turnaround time. The time at which you first start, the timer starts when you submit the code, and then from there, when they get to see all their results. And now, because we are doing this split and then running it in parallel, we were able to reduce the time, keeping the 99 percentile completely dropped there. The average remained the same, because a good percentage of developers, they do write good code, or I can say the average folks do write reasonably good code, that the split was not really needed for them. But where it helped is the folks who couldn't solve this on time. Like people who are struggling to get this question solved, now they have few extra seconds on every time they run code, which means it's like they have extra time where they can debug their bad code and get an opportunity to crack that question and get a job, and they are not delayed because our issues with our environment. So that's the delta in that second. I think of it as a 1 hour assessment. Every time if we save like about 30 seconds in every run code, it gives that last 3 or 4 minutes. And historically we have seen, I don't know why, no matter how long you give, the last 3-4 minutes is what matters. Like the spike is always at that time. So people do get that time in case if they want to, when they want to perform better. So that's on the technical side of things. So this is how the UI later looks like. There's a GIF animation there where you do get to see the random test cases, which are like, they're not all sequentially doing. Earlier it used to be all waiting, and then in one go you get all the results, because that's when everything is processed. Now it's done in batches, and then you could get the batches immediately done. So that's how some of the best practices in scaling work for us, and some of the best practices in scaling didn't directly work for us. Like and especially this, when you have 100,000 developers taking an assessment at the same time, the initial approaches, the standard approaches, doesn't work. The second part of my talk, and this is where I'm hoping everyone can contribute, is we have about 20 plus million developers on our developer platform who come ahead and then they learn different programming languages, different concepts, and we conduct this annual survey with them on different topics. And I wanted to share some of those here and see what resonates with you folks. This is general developer recruitment hiring topic questions. The first one is like, when did you start coding, right? And at what age did developers start coding? And what we got is about 1 in 4 developers actually started writing code before they could legally drive a vehicle or before they got their license. The 25, the first 2 lines, like 25%, they got to learn. There is 5 to 10. I don't know how that happened. For sure, I don't fall in that bucket. Not in 11 to 15, but 25%, they do start early. And the other interesting data is people who started late, let's say 26 plus, even they are in good senior positions in wherever they are, like their job titles and other data. So it doesn't matter whether you start early or start late, it still can catch up on different things there. So that's a pretty interesting stat. Like, I didn't know that developers do start that early on their coding skills. The second thing, how did you learn to code? Like, what is the source of learning how to code? Majority of the developers are self-taught. That's around 70-75% of the developers are self-taught. And this is even from the folks who went to school and university. It's like, I did go to this university, but still my programming skills comes from things I've learned on my own. And there are different dimensions to this. One is, on an average, a developer knows about 4 different programming languages, and they want to learn, I think, 4 more. Like, that's their, and how do they learn? Different sources they find online. I mean, when we did the survey, there was not a lot of GPT and stuff. I don't know how much GPTs and Copilot changes this research, but the predominant way for them to learn is this. Another, I don't know if it's controversial thing, is the junior developers, people who are less than age 16, they know about 4 languages and they want to learn another 4. And the senior folks, when it comes to that, they probably want to stop at 3 languages. Like, maybe it is like they have figured out, here are the 3 languages which make sense. And at the end of the day, the languages are simply tools. Like, you know one, you can go ahead and apply the same logic in another one. There is, given how fast technology is, how many of you have ever know this term jQuery? Yes, I'm pretty sure you folks are not using it anymore. It's all React. right? So there was this jQuery way back, and then it started with your single page applications with Backbone JS, and then came an Angular, and then Angular went on its own versions, and then came in React. Things are coming out super fast, and there is a clear need for developers to consistently learn from different sources. So there is no way you could rely completely on the school and university hiring there. The biggest bug in production. Any guesses? Infinite loop. Yeah, I don't think it goes that specific. It is, yeah, deployed untested or broken code. Majority of them, including myself. So it's not like I do want to exclude myself out of this. Wiped out the database was the second highest. That scares me a lot. That's close to about 10%. Shutting down production server, of course, turned off the firewall without allowing access, and then I couldn't access that server. These are some of the things which developer do, and that's the thing that I don't know if this will change. It's one of those things where I could say like, okay, we got to start testing more. There is always that push for doing things with higher velocity and things to need to move fast. So for sure, I'm guessing this is gonna stay. Next one. Did you learn code before you were 16 years old? And this one comes from our Women in Tech report, where folks who the delta at 35 plus when they learned coding, the delta between men and women was 20%. And if you take the and that's probably, think of it as how it was like 10 years back or 15 years back. And if you take the current generation, like people who are learning coding before 16, and if their current age is 18 to 24, 20% of them are men, and women is at 13%. So the gap is completely, reducing more and more. And this again comes from different opportunities with which we are able to, do the self-learning. You don't really have to rely on schools and colleges, and the number of ways in which you can do self-learning at your own pace, at your own time, helps a lot in bridging this gap. So this is something I'm personally very excited about, to see how this goes on and what are the different, like for example, probably is AI another important factor which can reduce this gap even further, because now even though you're learning online, you still need a tutor. You need someone to clarify your doubts, and that's where people get stuck. With AI in picture, you do have your own self-tutor to teach you programming, to put in your code and find what's wrong with the code and tell you, here is the mistake someone had made, and hopefully that takes it there. What do most students want in a job? This comes from a student developer report we did in one of the years. Predominantly, it's growth and learning. It starts completely with growth and learning, and then goes into work-life balance, and then the interesting problems. Like, these are the top three. And this was this was different from my prediction, because I thought the compensation would be somewhere way up in the top. Either people didn't really tell the truth, or my guess was wrong. So I'm gonna assume my guess was wrong, because it was an anonymous survey, and it is with millions of developers and millions of students in the community. So if you are hiring for a junior talent, the primary thing you can sell is the growth and learning. Like, for example, what are the mentorship opportunities you have in your company? What are the ways in which it could even be something like a book club. Like, here are the technical books we are going to read in our book club. There is something we do in Hackarank called Labs Reads, where we pick up a good technical article, sit together, read, and then have a 15-minute discussion. And then what are, even from an HR and policies, what are the things you can have in place to help in better growth and learning? For example, can they do an online training? Could you compensate for their OpenAI or the GPT-4 is there? And the second one is work-life balance. This, I don't think we can avoid it anymore. Like, it's a lot of founders, people who put in long hours, and we do want our early folks to do that as well. But work-life balance matters a lot for the early talent. So it is something you got to also put in place to see how you can sell this. And the last is the kind of the problem you can have. In fact, this is something even we recommend to our customers as well, saying the first problem statement where I showed the coding editor, and on the left side there was a problem statement which said something like, okay, find if a number is even or odd. Rather than that, the recommendation is your interview problems should resonate the interesting challenges they will come and solve in the job. So it could be the same concept you are evaluating, it could be the same concept you are testing for, but could it have a storyline on how this maps to the job they are going to come and do. So for example, one of the standard coding challenges in data algorithms and data science is your graph theory problems, and if you want them to find the shortest route within a graph, and let's say if you're Amazon, the problem statement completely changes to, okay, here is your delivery person, here are the edges, and these are the nodes, and how in what order they should deliver. It's typical simpler version of a traveling salesman problem. So the connection between what they solve in hiring to what interesting problems they are going to solve, there's a very, very clear thing. And you could actually sell the role by having those interesting challenges in the problem statement. I think this is my last slide. I do have a lot of time for questions though. What's the top hurdle in building a partnership between recruiters and managers? This we did in our recruiting report. This is all of our B2B customers who are trying, with whom we did the survey. And the primary one from hiring managers is aligning on expectations. And the primary problem from recruiters is getting timely feedback. Hiring managers have their own mental model of what is the kind of developers you want to hire. It's like the worst definition is we want a rock star. Like, okay, define more, like tell me more. If you want a full stack developer, should the full stack developer be more focused on front end or back end? In these days, should someone be focused on, would you evaluate a person on their skills to use AI or not? Like, if I solve the question, if I'm stuck with the debugging problem, if I put it in GPT and get the solution fast, am I going to be penalized because you didn't solve it? Or am I going to be given credits because you found the shortest way to do it? There are different companies taking different paths. So you got to be clear on this is what we need. And the recurring connect between, hiring is an extra load for founders, developers. It is necessary. You can't skip it, but it is on top of the product development, and which means the call with the recruiters is the last thing they would want, like this one more Zoom or Google Meet you have to have, where you are explaining the basics on what a front-end developer is. You're explaining the basics on what skills you need in this back-end developer, and that's like you're solving super hard problems and coming back to the basics, saying this is what I expect in the resume. But trust me, that 30 minutes you spend with the recruiters really pays out in much bigger ROI, because then you don't have to spend your time with candidates who may not cut the bar, or reviewing a lot of resumes, or sending a lot of assessments. And so from the recruiter side, it's always getting timely feedback, and it's, you want to hire fast but you won't give feedback fast, is a very confusing state for recruiters. So and again, it goes back to the amount of other things which hiring managers, or usually developers, have on their plate, which is the product delivery and different other things they have to do on. But this is the biggest bottleneck, both from what we got from our stuff. So those, and yes, so aligning on expectations, getting timely feedback is for this. So we have, we have a bunch of research which we do every year, keep publishing it on our website. So you can see the developer skills report and then women in tech report, university tech talent report, and so on. You can go to this URL and find this there. Those are the things I had. So happy to answer any questions you may have. Yeah. Thank you.
The co-founder of RevConsole. We are just bootstrapped, and if we are hiring the first few engineers, do you think it's a good idea to train them in such a way we make replicas of ourselves, or we need to find them to be contrast to ourselves so that we have the full spectrum of analysis of how the product is being built?
Wow. I'll tell you how we hired in our early days. I don't know if it's possible. If it's possible, try to do that. So we didn't have an office. So we had a 3 BHK in somewhere in Indiranagar, and it's me and so it's 2 developers and 1 big hall where we had put out tables, where that's our working area. And then we used to invite, and because nobody knew what HackerRank was, so we weren't sure if we'll be able to get experienced folks, so we started looking into university hiring. And we used to invite these students to our home on Friday, and then build something together over the weekend, and they would stay with us because we had space, and there was no specific interview because the lunch, dinner, breakfast conversation was all some random technical conversations. And they would fly out, or actually they would travel by bus, not fly out, but they'll leave Sunday night, and then they would go back to the college on Monday. So this is how we got our first 4 to 5 hires. It was very confusing for the house owner because there is one weekday where there are 2 folks, and then weekend there is this. It probably they felt like we are running an Airbnb there for weekends, and then but it worked well. So there are things where the first few hires can differ, and there are things where early differences is going to pull you back in momentum. And there is this thing called a blind leap of faith you have in the early stage. Like if for example, and founders usually have it, and if you find a very radical person who's going to question everything with a why, and this doesn't make sense, you need to have data to prove this, and you can't wait for the data. So if the question is like, if you find the people with that kind of conviction, passion, or people who blindly believe the idea, if they are in a different tech, if they are in a different programming stack, those are all can be different. But if at core, if there is one or few constant people who are constantly, there is like, you do want to question the idea at some point, but not every day. Like it sort of like checkpoints, like I'm going to blindly do this for 6 months and figure it out if it makes sense or not after 6 months. Gives you a lot of mental peace even for 6 months. Like otherwise you're questioning your own idea every day, which is a tough state spot to be in. So you don't, if you find folks like that, then sure, the tech stack, rest of the other things, background can certainly change. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi Hari, I think great presentation, and you are building such a good product. It is appreciable. I wanted to ask one thing. Is currently, since the hiring market is very cold, right? And which is good for us. We can get a few IITs from. They are TPUs are approaching us. So and there are a few other private colleges also approaching us, right? So what is your view? So you have seen the difference between the IITs hiring and the normal college hiring. So do you feel any difference in tech talent?
I think, I first of all, I want to know how it's good for you. Like, is it because you're getting more candidates applying now?
Yeah. And the package is like, for us, it is affordable.
Actually, more than the package, the biggest comfort factor is if someone signs the offer, they would join. Like the biggest pain is like one day before you are still figuring out probabilities on this person would be like, I'm not even kidding. I had my recruiter say, I'm going to go to this temple and break a coconut if this person joins, right? Like literally happened. So those were like the peak times when it was candidates market. Now I think there is a balance. And in fact, one of the core ethos of HackerRank is skills over pedigree, which is we do have good talent everywhere. It's the right way to find it. Like there are like some of the tier 2, tier 3 universities where people have contributed to good open source packages like Google Summer of Code, people solving challenges in HackerRank, and we can see their progress over time. So, and I don't know if you like IITs have this weird day 0, day 1, day 2 concept. I hope it didn't go to day -1. Like I don't know where it starts. So somehow, at least for us, we have strictly maintained like not going to universities. What we do is we do have a 6-month internship program. 2 months is very tricky. Like college students, they write code for 2 months and then realize the code they wrote is bad and they have to improve it. So the 2-month internship never really worked for us. They do work on production data or the production website, so their code gets shipped, and we give them critical projects to work on. So for example, some of the parallel thing was done by one of the interns earlier. So, and because you work with them for 6 months, it's a good way to see if we can hire them or not. There are a good set of universities, interestingly not IITs, but but you still find enough candidates who are really good and able to intern for 6 months. So that's, and our conversion rate is about, we have 15 interns in a batch and have about 6 or 7 offered from that. And that has been our cycle for hiring junior talent. Anything more than that, we become bottom heavy, and mentoring them and having the right org structure becomes tricky. So that worked for us. You may try it out for a couple of years.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Right? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you so
have one
much.
more? Sorry.
Hey, this is just an experience with HackerRank when I was interviewing. Thanks to HackerRank, I missed a lot of opportunities. For some reason, I couldn't code at a time limit. I mean, when I spoke to a couple of developers who are my colleagues at that time, they kind of expressed the same thing. Macha, I can't code when you give me a timer there. I don't know if it's my loss or company's loss. Care to explain?
I mean, I would call it company's loss because you don't code with a timer in real world. So our goal is to make sure how we can simulate the real world. Like for example, I don't know if we have a high timer option, because truth be told, I get nervous when there is a timer. Like it is a little, I mean, the timer could be 30 minutes more, and I know it's a lot of time, but still it is there and it is ticking. So what the first thing which I'm sure I did this way back is remove the seconds from it, and the seconds come in the last 2 minutes. So at least the digits doesn't go down as if it feels like all the movies where you have to cut this bomb and then that last 10 seconds is there. So we want to take that pressure out of developers. But if we don't show the timer out there, people also lose track of how much time they have. It's an interesting balance. So I think maybe hiding the timer for a good amount of time. The other thing we do recommend companies to do is within the product we tell them what is the average time it takes for someone to solve this, and we give a recommended time so that the time is enough for you. Like nobody is going to evaluate you based on how fast you solve it. So if the test time in itself is automatically generated based on all of this, hopefully you don't have to feel the pressure. You feel like there is a lot. So that's a good feedback. I'll take it and see what we can do. Yes. Any other questions? Oh, there's one last.
Hi Hari. I'm Balaji from Survey Sparrow. So we used to use HackerRank before the GPT era as well, and we used to use for conducting campus recruitments. So now what's happening is after GPT, if we are trying to do bulk assessments, most of the kids, right, they end up copying from GPT, right? And we kind of, lose the legitimate folks because of the few folks who are copying. Even if there is some plagiarism check, there is a screenshot that is taken, but still, people still find ways, right? They take from mobile in a way that, it is very hard to capture what's going on, right? So how we can basically solve it for the bulk recruitment? For the senior and mid-level folks, we are fine.
Yeah, I mean, we should solve it, and it's one of the things where we actually have a filter where a question is AI solvable or not. The things which candidates are doing, we have a team of developers who do that automatically. We do get access to the models a little early so that we have a partnership with OpenAI where we could see that what all it can solve and how we can ensure that the questions can be changed in different ways so that you can't just get it as it is from OpenAI or any of the other models. And specifically, I have to introduce a feature saying, are these questions AI solvable or not? But every model, every time when OpenAI launches something, it's like we got to go back and redo all of this exercise all over again. And as well as more and more developers solving this question, especially your case of bulk recruitment, when you say that, more developers solving it, even giving the question to OpenAI and asking different right kind of prompts makes it solvable. So this is a continuous process which we do have. I don't know how, it's one of those things where there is a team within HackerRank which is trying to solve this, and there is another team which is giving OpenAI while you are solving the question. Because we believe that's the world we are going to be in. Like, you can't avoid developers using any of this Copilot or OpenAI for their development, productivity development. So you actually get a question. Along with that, you get a Copilot saying, ask the questions and see the questions, rather than becoming simple questions, become a little bit of a debugging question. So you said if you're not using HackerRank, the best way is you got to embrace AI. I think the fight against it is only for a short duration. So how does your hiring process include Copilot, include an AI bot, is how we are also trying to solve. So we are doing both and curious to see which one wins. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Hari. I know that you have been building a very strong team at your office and then continue to build more stronger. And it's